I chose the Kansas State Masters of Agribusiness program for two reasons. The first is program flexibility. I wanted to be able to go to school while maintaining a full-time job. The second is that it's agriculturally focused. I intend on staying in the agriculture industry long-term, and this program complements that with a faculty and staff that know and understand my long-term objectives.
Thank you for joining us for our Agri-Pulse Washington Week in Review. I'm Spencer Chase, joined as always by Agri-Pulse Executive Editor Phil Brasher, as well as this week by South Dakota Republican Senator John Thune. And Senator Thune, we appreciate you joining us.
Spencer, good to be with you. Thank you, as always.
Well, and we want to start off this week. There's probably a long list of things we could talk about going on in Washington this week. One of the more flurry of activity weeks that we've seen here in quite a while. But something that we are going to see, come to fruition today. It looks as if we've got an agreement between the administration and Congress on something to avoid a government shutdown that would have happened at about midnight with a continuing resolution to fund the government into December. I guess your thoughts on some of the agricultural provisions that we see within that legislation, specifically things like the $10 billion in disaster relief, the extension of livestock mandatory reporting. Your thoughts on some of the ag language within this CR?
Right. It was an agreement that got struck. For whatever reason, it always happens this way around here, Spencer, that we wait until the 11th hour. The government would run out of money tonight at midnight if we don't act. And in the absence of having passed individual appropriation bills, we pass a continuing resolution, which will fund the government into December, hopefully by which time we'll have come to an agreement on the broader spending bill. But that being said, yes, there are some provisions in the continuing resolution that impact agriculture. There's $10 billion in there for the WIP Plus program, which is the wildfires, hurricanes, indemnity program, now to include drought, which is something that we've been experiencing in South Dakota this year. So that'll provide hopefully some much needed and meaningful relief for crop producers in South Dakota, but also livestock producers. There's some money set aside specifically there that will help livestock producers. And then, as you mentioned, the livestock reporting language that was set to expire with the funding at the end of the fiscal year, which is tonight at midnight, has now been extended. That's a good thing. We're looking for changes to that are reforms, but probably we'll end up having to wait until maybe the next farm bill to get that done. So in the meantime, at least we've got to have that language continued, and so that will also stay in effect if and when this bill passes. I expect sometime later today.
Senator, we shift a little bit here to the reconciliation bill, the Build Back Better bill that Democrats are trying to put together. We got our hands this week on the amendment that would have the $28 billion in conservation spending. This would apparently be the largest infusion of money into conservation programs since the Dust Bowl, even bigger than what you all did in 2002. What do you think about this? What is your assessment of what you're seeing here? You've been a big supporter of a lot of these programs and conservation funding in general.
You're right, and that's something that's important to me, and it's important to South Dakota, Phil. And I've been active in the conservation title of the Farm Bill, every Farm Bill, trying to get policies in place that will help our farmers not only derive a living from the land, but preserve and protect that land. And our farmers are great stewards, and there have been incentives in these programs in the past, the CRP, for example, to take some of the ground out of cropping and put it into grass that not only helps maintain wildlife, but is good long term for the soil. And so there's a lot of policies, I would say, probably in this big package that would be good. I mean, there are things in there I'm sure I would support, but if you look at the totality of it, I mean, it's a huge expansion of government, and certainly there's dollars in there, resources that are applied to agriculture, not just in the conservation area, but in some other areas as well. None of which, however, was negotiated with Republicans. In the past, when we've done farm bills, they've always been bipartisan negotiations. The chairman of the House, Senate Ag Committee right now, or I should say the chairman, the ranking Republican, is John Bozeman from Arkansas. And he wasn't consulted with any of this. These are all decisions made only by the Democrats, and they expect to pass this bill only with Democrat votes. Not just because of the ag provisions, but because of all the other expansions of government that are included. It's a $3.5 trillion spending spree paid for with higher taxes, many of which will hit farmers and ranchers and small business people across South Dakota and the country. And at a time when really, frankly, we don't need to do this. We've already got inflation kind of spiraling out of control. The Fed chairman said earlier this week that it's the hottest inflation that we've seen in 30 years. And pouring more money out there right now strikes me as a really bad idea if you're worried about further worsening the inflation problem. So all that to say, yes, there'll be some good things I'm sure that I would be in favor of in the agricultural provisions there. But that's a small amount of a $3.5 trillion package that is the biggest expansion of government since the 1930s, and really makes the government, makes people more dependent upon the government. It's a cradle to grave type approach, and it is literally, I call it the free everything bill. It's written by the Bernie Sanders wing of the Democrat Party, and so it really moves us more in the direction of a socialist type economy. And I think it's again, there'll be individual provisions that I might like, but this is just a bad, direction, bad policy for the country.
Another action this week is Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack announced plans to move ahead with funding large-scale projects for purchasing or promoting climate-smart commodities, not a carbon break per se, but promoting climate-smart commodities. What do you think about this approach that they're taking?
Well, I'm very much supportive of, as are I think most of the farm organizations in South Dakota, addressing the climate issues, and we do a lot in South Dakota, as we already mentioned. In the conservation title, the Farm Bill, a lot of the policies in that are designed to, move us away from some of the carbon emitting and greenhouse gas emitting, emissions that are going out into the atmosphere. And farmers, frankly, tend to, expect to benefit from that because they store carbon. And so if there is some sort of a carbon market that develops as a result of this, you're starting to see that already kind of organically. I think farmers could benefit from that. What I don't like is the idea of the government, doing it in a top-heavy way, heavy-handed government doing it through regulations and mandates. These programs need to be incentive-based. If you provide the right incentives, people's behavior sort of follows. We do respond to incentives. And I think if the right incentives are out there, people will do the right things. But with respect to stewardship, the environment, the climate, green energy, everything else, farmers are some of the best at that. They're the best stewards of the land. They understand the value the land brings, not only in the present, but in the future. And I think are always taking steps to protect and preserve that land for future generations. The policy part of this, really ought to be focused, in my view, around incentive-based solutions that are voluntary, that are market-based. And I think you will see some significant solutions in innovation come as a result of that. And agriculture very well could be leading the way.
At the same time, the secretary also announced that an additional $3 billion in assistance to farmers, to schools, to combat African swine fever, assistance for drought, supply chain disruptions, all of this coming through the Commodity Credit Corporation account that the secretary has. Back in the previous administration, the Republicans were put a lot of very much tied Secretary Vilsack's hands when it came to using the CCC. And of course, the secretary is also looking at using the CCC for these climate smart commodities, these projects that we were just talking about. What do you think about the secretary's fairly aggressive use of the CCC now? Something that the former president really started with the trade war with China.
Right. And I think in the previous administration, they did use some CCC funds to help compensate or reimburse farmers for loss of markets as a result of some of the administration's trade policies. I'm uncomfortable with dipping into that. That's kind of a reserve fund, an emergency fund. It is, used obviously at times of drought. Sometimes that's dipped into, or other weather-related disasters to help out livestock or crop producers. My view, however, is that it's not something that should just be rated for every priority that any administration has. As you point out, the previous administration did do it. There was an argument at the time based upon Chinese retaliation against American agriculture, that we needed to do something to help support our producers in the sort of the wake of that trade war, if you will. But, as a matter of precedent, and now this administration talking about doing it for climate type stuff, I'm very wary of that, reluctant to support that. I think that the CCC program's there for a specific purpose and not to become sort of the slush fund for the priorities of each and every administration. So I'm going to be watching very carefully what they do and make sure that, again, these are truly related to profitability and agriculture, and not things that tend to be tangents that the administration wants to achieve as part of their larger, I would say, political agenda.
Senator, I want to wrap up today talking about a favorite subject of yours and a favorite subject of many ranchers in your home state, that being country of origin labeling. It's a topic that we've been covering for quite a while here. And of course, we saw the mandatory iteration of the U.S. language repealed in 2015. And since then, there's been a number of folks really looking to get that back on the books. And we've seen some effort on the part of you and your office to see if that can't be explored again through some conversations with the U.S. trade representative. But we saw the cool cases in 2014 and 15 and the amount of retaliation that's possible as the result of this language. And some people seem to think that there is a bit of a needle to be thread between, reinstating this language, but then also preventing that retaliation from Canada and Mexico. I guess your thoughts on how much room there is to negotiate here between reinstating this language, but still avoiding retaliation from two major trading partners?
Right, and we are going to have to thread the needle, Spencer, and that's what makes this challenging. Is we've included mandatory country of origin labeling now in two farm bills that I've been associated with in 2002 and again in 2008. It was struck down by the World Trade Organization, and they did give Canada and Mexico the right to implement and levy retaliatory tariffs against the U.S., which we were afraid were going to be directed at agriculture. But I think we've got to get past the concern about offending the World Trade Organization. Yes, in my latest bill, the American Beef Labeling Act does in fact involve the U.S. Trade Representative's Office, Department of Agriculture, in drafting language that could be WTO compliant. Gives them a year to do that. If they don't, then mandatory country of origin labeling kicks in again. And then we're just going to have to learn how to defend it. And, I think, and I actually, the Director General of the World Trade Organization was in town this last week, and I directed a question to her and her deputy with respect to country of origin labeling. And I said, we've got to fix this. You cannot defend and explain why every other product we have in the world carries a label, but the stuff, the food that we put, the meat we put at the center of our plate doesn't. And so, obviously they are aware of the complaints that are going to be filed by other countries around the world. But I just basically shot a warning shot at them that we're coming at this again. And we're going to try and do it in a way that doesn't offend the sensibilities of other countries, but that the American rancher, livestock producer, deserves to have that label on their product. And the American consumer deserves to know where their meat is coming from. And to me, it's a fundamental issue of fairness and, really being able to market your product in an effective way. And our livestock producers have the best quality products in the world. They ought to be able to differentiate them in a way that allows the American consumer, if they choose to buy American products. And that to me, it's a very simple, straightforward issue. And I'm tired of messing with the World Trade Organization over this. The time's come for us once and for all to get permanently in statute country of origin labeling. So we're going to keep after it, but it is important to a ton of people across my state and across the country who have been struggling for years now with these products that come in from other places around the world and carry a made in the USA label on them, and they're not. That's got to change.
Quickly here as we wrap up, in the event that World Trade Organization retaliatory authorization cannot be avoided, is mandatory COOL still something you would support, given the fact that retaliation could happen as a result of it?
Yeah, and and it's going to be hard because there are going to be other members of Congress that'll get really skittish if there are threats of retaliation, et cetera. But I would tell you, talking to livestock producers in South Dakota, and when I was at the Stock Growers Convention here a few weeks ago in Spearfish, South Dakota, I had ranchers suggest to me, hey, we're willing to pay it if it's $1 billion. Take it out of per head basis. But we have got to have country of origin labeling. That's how important it is to them. Now, obviously, we're not going to make them do that. But, I just think that our trade negotiators, and this is why we've consulted and given the USTR an opportunity a year to come up with language that can be drafted in a way that hopefully, as you pointed out earlier, threads the needle, but also that can be implemented so that they're willing to defend it, to go to the World Trade Organization and say, no, we're not going to, this isn't any different than any of the other labeling regimes that places around the world have. Why should the United States be treated any differently? So that's, where we are. And we're going to incorporate their ideas and hopefully language into this that can strike that balance and thread that needle. But this is, the time has come, and it's time for the United States to defend itself at the World Trade Organization and not let these guys continue to get away with this.
So obviously that on top of a number of other things going on in Washington this week, as I mentioned at the onset, a very busy, very active week and across a number of fronts in the House and Senate, as well as in the Biden administration. And Senator Thune, we appreciate your thoughts on all of these subjects.
Always good being with you. Thanks. Thanks, Spencer. Thanks, Phil.
For Senator John Thune and Phil Brasher, I'm Spencer Chase. Have a good one.